right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Especially delighted to have this very, very illustrious panel tonight. And I would like also to thank our numerous guests and the phenomenal audience that signed up to join us today. I was just commenting with my colleagues earlier. We had about 250 registrations, and it's like a who's who of cybersecurity and AI. We have a bunch of very highly qualified CEOs, industry leaders, government people. I mean, I'm very, very humbled really by the audience. The panel that we have here is really the feather in the cap of our institute. I've had the honor and privilege to work closely with everyone on the panel, and I'd like to run through a quick set of introductions of the folks on the panel. We have Lucian Niemeyer, first of all. Lucian, welcome. Lucian was former Assistant Secretary of Defense. He was the Department of Energy, I believe. He was, I think you were also with the United States Air Force as an officer, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you for your service. Lucian, welcome to our circle. Perhaps you could just spend another couple of minutes and maybe explain to us where you came from and what have been the highlights of your journey to this point.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I'm sure everybody's got a great story where they come from. Right now, I'm working with you, Carlo. I run a nonprofit organization, really trying to raise standards for cybersecurity. That's my passion. Also knee deep in the data center AI business. So looking forward to be able to discuss that. And yes, served as a former Assistant Secretary of Defense. Never served the Department of Energy, so make sure we're clear on that. Mainly Assistant Secretary of Defense. I also served in the White House. And one good point, I also served 11 years in the United States Senate on the Armed Services Committee professional staff. So kind of bring that Air Force background, that LEDGE background, and then the DoD background. And looking forward to be able to discuss some of the national security implications of AI. So I really appreciate being invited to the panel.
Incredible. Thank you, Lucian. Thank you, as always, for being with us. Ernest Vernig has very kindly been able to join us today, replacing, unfortunately, Kelvin Coleman, who had a family emergency and he couldn't come. Kelvin was a White House cybersecurity advisor, but so is Ernest. So, Ernest, I'd love for you to give us a little background. What I know is that you've had a background with the DOE, with the DoD, with the White House, as an advisor with the NSC, and you've also been involved in Fortune 50 companies. Could you give us a quick background there, Ernest, please?
Sure. Like Lucian, I'll be brief and understand everyone's got a strong background, and we want to get to the meat of the matters here. So yes, as you said, long experience in the let's just say the risk industry. Started out in the Air Force as well. I was an intelligence officer, and then helped stand up the first information warfare squadron back in the mid 90s. So that's sort of my initial experience with cybersecurity, if you will. Grew up through the Air Force, through DoD. Did some advising on the Hill, White House, through various consulting, one of those evil consulting organizations that I won't mention at the moment. I've done both government and federal work, as well as private sector. Spent some time in the utility industry. So the critical infrastructure aspect of national security is also a great interest for me as well. And right now I'm responsible for a small advisory organization in terms of business, but also working with a few partners on a nonprofit as well that, quite honestly, we keep arguing over the name, so we haven't actually got it officially launched yet. But it'll be focused on sort of how we manage the convergence of emerging technologies for social good. That's where I'm coming from, Carlo.
Wonderful, Ernest, and thank you very much for honoring us with your presence, and thank you also for your military service and service to the intelligence community. Adnan, please. Adnan has what I can say. We have worked quite closely together now for a good 4 years. Adnan was one of the earliest members of our think tank, Adnan is with Intel. He originally was with Dell when I first met him. He has a very impressive industrial background in high performance computing and AI. And we're lucky to have him as an active member on our post-quantum cryptography task force and other activities that I think Tech conducts. So Adnan, please, can you maybe elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah, thank you very much, Carlo. Again, it's been a pleasure working with you, or actually it's been longer than 4 years because I first started engaging with you back when I was at Dell. But yeah, no. So my background is in high performance computing AI. I'm mostly on the engineering side. That's where I started my career, designing, high performance processors. There's almost no part of a supercomputer that I haven't either directly designed or worked on, including the software and all of that. But I think I was at Cray for 8 years, Cray Supercomputers, which was supplying some of the critical, supercomputing infrastructure to the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, NSA, you name it. Like Cray had all of these massive, powerful systems, and that's when I first got involved, working with our national security agencies. Right now, my interests have sort of again, I still do a lot of the HPC and the AI stuff. AI has definitely transformed everything. But more so, I'm looking at some of the next generation of technologies like neuromorphic. So when you talk about, autonomous AI drones where you're power constrained, but yet you want to be able to do very interesting sort of maneuvering of these machines, you look at very power efficient processing technologies like neuromorphic, and then as you mentioned earlier, quantum. Now that's an area that's actively being developed. We know we have our allies in Europe that are investing a lot, as well some of other places like China, where they do see that as a key differentiator and something that could act as a force multiplier for them. So it's really critical that the United States and its allies stays ahead in these critical areas of technology. But anyways, I'm glad to be a part of this group. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Adnan. And last but not least, Michael Tismeyer, my partner on the National AI and Cybersecurity ISAO, and also one of the founding members of the new Cyber Eagle program. Michael, can you elaborate and tell us a bit more about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much. And very happy to be here. Like you said, currently I'm the Executive Director of the National Artificial Intelligence and Cybersecurity ISAO. That's a private-public partnership NGO focused on cyber diplomacy, cyber capacity building, R&D, and a bunch of other things kind of at this intersection of AI and cybersecurity. And that's really what keeps me busy today or nowadays, because this intersection, I think, is incredibly important for us to analyze and to control, because we want to make sure that AI is safely adopted across societies. Right? It affects societal resiliency. It affects every single layer of society. I also work as an independent consultant, board advisor, and I'm the chairman of the United Nations AI for Good Innovation Factory Baltics. Before that, I have about a little bit over 20 years in various Silicon Valley information security and technology leadership roles. Worked with companies, large and small. I was a leader at Sony PlayStation during the PS4 launch, and worked there with people to actually create the launch model. And then we led the launch using basically a war room model, and I was in the control room for that. I have helped shape international cybersecurity standards, worked on a lot of working groups, US government, NATO, and nations on matters involving cybersecurity AI. I just, one day ago, was part of the working group for NIST's ARIA program, which has to do with red teaming and field testing AI solutions before they're being introduced in society. I've done NIST's National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, was part of NIST AI RMF, so various different things there. But I've also worked as a leader in multiple startups and helped lead them from inception to successful $1 billion plus IPOs. So I also understand that part of the market. Kind of done that Silicon Valley rat race a few times. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Very good. Thank you, Michael. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Carlo. I'm the chairman of the Tutor Beta Institute and a co-founder of the National AI and Cybersecurity ISAO. Quick plug for the Institute. We are a multi-stakeholder platform for discussions on national security defense, cybersecurity in particular, and really everything that is at the crossroads of AI and cybersecurity. We have some areas of interest in green tech AI and sustainable AI, responsible AI, which kind of all fits and dovetails in. Today we have a big victory from at our think tank. One of our members has actually won the AI for Good Innovation Factory for Climate Action at COP29 in Azerbaijan. So we're very proud of Vijay Korea from OptiCloud. Really happy about that. And I just wanted to extend a welcome to the audience. If you'd like to investigate the Institute, you can, I'll post a link on the comments where you can come in and explore our collaboration portal. And it's free for anybody to explore that up until the end of the year. All right, so that said, let's jump right into this discussion. We are at a point of inflection. Klaus Schwab, the leader of the World Economic Forum, calls it the fourth industrial revolution for good reason, because it really is an industrial revolution, and it is the biggest one so far. And I think when he wrote his book 3 years ago at the time, because COVID time, in the middle of COVID, he issued this book. He called it the Great Reset, and he said, this is the fourth industrial revolution, and it was COVID time. We hadn't really seen the liftoff that AI is showing us right now. And right now we're at this exponential growth in technological capability. Just the other day, I was at a AI conference, and I heard Sam Altman talk on how he perceived the next 3 years, and he said it's going to be even crazier. And I totally believe him. I totally see this, and the impact of that on cyber criminals. It's an incredible empowerment, right? And right now that we're at the peak of cyber conflict and cyber war, we are obviously all concerned about all this. So there is an AI arms race, and there is also an arms race around cybersecurity and talent and hacking talent. So the first thing I wanted to ask my panel is, how do you feel the arms race is going? And who do you think will prevail in the fullness of time? Let me put that question to Lucian first.
Yeah, sure thing. So we definitely are in an arms race. There's no doubt about it. And what I'm focusing on is maybe not what the rest of the panelists are. So I want to make sure I separate a little bit. To me, if you look at data as a new oil, that's an overused term. But you also have it's a good term, because then you can get into refining capability for that data. You can also get into manufacturing of that data into something else. So I really do see AI as emerging as the true enabler of using data to make critical decisions, and really to give somebody, whoever can master it, what they call information dominance, or decision dominance, or data supremacy. So those terms are emerging in the national security space, and I think they're absolutely appropriate. And more importantly, they drive the urgency of the situation. What I'm focusing on is, do we want AI generation in certain countries? So I would like to use this opportunity to talk about a concept called sovereign AI, where the manufacturing capability, think about the plants, the data centers, all that is on sovereign soil. Because I do believe that, as like any instrument of national power, if there's a risk of being disrupted or denied or destroyed, then we have a real national security problem. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on with my group is, okay, what can we do to accelerate the development of AI driving data centers and infrastructure on sovereign soil, so we can ensure that it is in no way disrupted. And that includes mainly also my power background, my energy background. As you know, in this country, we're running out of power on the grid. So we do need to look at what is happening in the innovative solutions to bring more power to the grid to power AI. And love what Microsoft's doing, and Google looking at Microsoft opening up 3 Mile Island, Google investing in advanced nuclear power. But you've got a lot of these hyperscalers realizing, hey, we want to keep this infrastructure in the United States. What do we need to do to make it happen?
That's great. Would anybody else like to chime in? I see that Adnan is already unmuted.
Yeah. So, that's a very good answer, Lucian. The way What I'm afraid of is a couple of different things. One is our ability to produce the technology in this country, and that's where Intel has put in a lot of energy in trying to bring back semiconductor manufacturing, stateside, because currently, as we all know, it's in Taiwan and other countries. But the other thing is the potential for misinformation. That's how the technology is being utilized by these bad actors. The odd thing is you don't need to have the best AI in order to generate, misinformation. In fact, sometimes good enough is good enough. And what you're going to see is a proliferation of, and the efficiency with which misinformation can be generated and spread. And that's an area that I've always been worried about, and more so, with the good comes the bad, and this is what we really need to be sort of aware of. And how do we combat that? And the implications for all of that goes into many different areas, from like how do you detect deep fakes? You talk about an arms race. That's exactly it. On one hand, you're trying to generate an accurate looking image. On the other hand, you're trying to be, you want to know if it's a fake image or not. And this is going to continue for a while. And we've seen this not only in computer technology, but in other areas as well, right? It's always, you have a good application of a technology, and the bad actors will always find the bad application of that technology, and they'll try to proliferate it. So we always have to be a step ahead in terms of our investments, in terms of our R&D, and so on.
Absolutely. No, I see that, Adnan. And also, I see that there's some questions that are coming in from the audience. I want to thank them for putting the questions across. And please carry on putting the questions across, and I'll put them across to the panel as the time allows.
I think, did Michael have a point? I thought I saw
Michael has a point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hand over.
So as you are aware, Carlo, we have the relationship with the SCSP, the Special Competitive Studies Project, and I actually was recently at the AI and Energy Summit that they hosted in DC. And of course, this arms race, as it relates to AI, was a very important aspect of the summit. And I think it drives home. This was focused on AI and energy. How many different parts are involved when you're trying to ensure what I would call competitive overmatch, right? Specifically, if you look at like our adversaries potentially. And energy is like one of those things. I think if I just bring up something, so one of the aspects that was mentioned was that we will have to build more miles in energy grid in order to satisfy our demand that currently is actually available and in place in the entire world, just for the United States. Try to wrap your head around this, what this means. When we're talking about where we're going in terms of our ability to establish competitive overmatch, right now, China is outproducing us in what's called capacity. But it's one thing to build and construct things. That is not enough by itself, right? There are other pieces where we have the overmatch and where we really, I will say, shine. And that has to do with, for example, innovation. That has to do with creating these rapid ecosystems that we can use, whether we talk about programs like Fast Track or other type of defense innovation systems that we're putting in place, or that are programs that are already in place, that give us, I think, a lot of overmatch. And one of the facts, or one of the things that was also mentioned is that I think about 10 years ago, the United States was the biggest importer of energy in the world. Now, we are not longer the biggest importer of energy, we're the biggest exporter. It's been 10 years. Think about how much of a change that is. And that really highlights our capability. Now, when it comes to sovereign AI, I think that is something that we absolutely have to do. But I'm going to, for a second, turn my Silicon Valley hat on. And here the problem is, I've worked in these startups where we had growth rates of over 1,000% year over year. And we literally won from California only to being in every single US state, in Canada, and in every whatever they call it, county or whatever in Britain within 12 months. We raised $450 million, all this kind of stuff. The problem is if we're talking about AI sovereignty and we really expand this, you just doubled my infrastructure cost. because now I have to run things separately for the US and separately for the EU, and that would prevent me from growing that fast potentially. But at the end of the day, okay, maybe this is a cost that we have to take into consideration when it comes to national security. What's the price of national security? Right, and that's a dialogue I think that we need to have. That's what I had.
Thank you, Michael. Michael is traveling in Asia, and sometimes your connection is a bit wobbly, but it's okay. You're understandable. Ernest just unplugged, unmuted.
Thank you, Carlo. All great responses, and I suspect we're all somewhat in mass agreement, at least in the frameworks, if not the meat of the implementation. The only thing I'd like to add real quickly in regards to this is the regulatory issue. And be quite honest, that is something that worries me and honestly keeps me up at night a little bit, especially in the US, but more so with our Western allies in Europe in terms of overregulation, basically disincentivizing, development. Because if we're going to have, so many fingers in the pie, so to speak, you're basically going to hamper our ability to meet the threat coming out of countries that are, let's just say, more focused on what they want AI to do and maybe not so much what we would like AI to do. So I was just listening this morning to an interview with the actual author and architect of the EU AI Act, who left the commission because after seeing where the implementation was going, realized that really wasn't, and I don't mean to put words into his mouth, but basically it seemed like that he realized there was going to be more of a hindrance than an enabler in terms of Europe developing things like foundational AI models. I think there's one in Europe, and there's close to a dozen in the US, and a few more in China, for example. And there's a reason for that. And part of that is the regulatory environment. Spain, which has no foundational models, now has a regulatory act for AI. So, how can you regulate something that you don't even really have an industry to gain a good grasp of the issues that are going to influence it? So I want to make sure, one of the things we need to make sure we're looking at is and kind of goes along with the political environment, let's just say in the US right now, and the way that the winds are blowing in terms of looking at less regulation potentially, but hopefully smarter regulation. And so I think that's the idea, and I think that's something that we need to make sure is emphasized specifically in this area, because we can't really afford to get that wrong because of all the other threats that we're talking about coming in from an external standpoint.
That's excellent, Ernest. That's a very, very interesting response there. Whilst we're on the subject of AI, and before we migrate to critical infrastructure, I wanted to pick up the very good question here from Bridget Small, fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, who says, what does the panel think of the potential of AI tools to replace government workers, particularly in the wake of Elon Musk's appointment, which is a really interesting one, actually, about looking at government efficiency, right? What safeguards need to be in place if AI tools are to be widely adopted to undertake public-facing tasks? I'd love to put that question over to both Ernest and Lucian. Who'd like to take it first?
Ernest, yeah, fire away, bud.
Okay, go.
Sure, Lucian, just throw me into the fire. Thanks. Yes, I'll be quite honest. There is a significant potential for artificial intelligence used wisely and deployed appropriately, which I will have to say that has not always been the case in terms of more recent models for, I won't say replacing, but definitely for enhancing and potentially reducing workforce load, let's put it that way, inside the federal government, and for, more importantly, increasing government responsiveness to the citizen and to the taxpayer. I think that's the critical issue to look at, is less so a worry about the somewhat limited workforce that we're talking about, which quite honestly is a very senior workforce, that if anything, AI will assist us in terms of those retirements that are currently flooding that market out and will continue to do so into the next decade. as quite honestly a significant amount of that baby boomer cohort leaves the government workforce. One of the issues we've been concerned about in the past when I've worked with government agencies has been that issue. How do you manage the government agency workload with what eventually will be probably a smaller workforce to draw upon? And if you look also at the, and I don't want to limit this just to the government, for example, I think if you look at manufacturing, for example, the potential is huge there for, especially for the US in terms of reshoring, I guess is the term we're using now, but actually based on the merging technology convergence of robotics and AI, the manufacturing floor, which is already changing significantly, is going to go through a significant revolution. The Chinese are working this issue because they've seen it in terms of their own workforce limitations, but it also gives us the opportunity, going to Lucian's sovereignty issue, of reshoring in a very significant way manufacturing back into the U.S. CONUS and specifically. So now that I've set the world on fire, probably, Lucian.
No, hey, I tell you right now, Ernest, you obviously aced diplomacy in college. I failed. So I'm going to probably give you a much more blunt assessment. So look, I think AI for bad is engineering social behavior. There's some really nefarious things that Annette brought up. I think AI for good, teach it the tax code, teach AI engineering principles, teach AI accounting principles. So there are X's and O's, and there are formulas you can put into AI that will ultimately be more accurate than what the human condition can do. So, I'm an architect. I believe the future is digital twins using AI to inform the digital twin. That in the matter what normally takes a year and a half or 2 years for a design process, you could teach AI the laws of physics, the laws of structures, mechanics, hydraulics. You could also teach AI quickly building codes and other codes, and you can then feed that into a digital twin. So engineers are now more creative. And that really allows the creative spirit to blossom, because now you can model and simulate through a digital twin a lot faster. Whether you're designing the next pharmaceutical, medicine, or designing, whatever, biological engineering, physical engineering, and you can use AI to accelerate that tremendously and do simulations and modeling in a matter of minutes of what you're inputting. So I think, it really has the ability in the trades and the disciplines for there are firm rules and laws. AI can be incredibly good. Where it goes way bad is when you start using AI to try to influence social behavior. When you get into the realm of the gray, and that, I think that's where we really need to focus on. But on the other areas, it's going to be a tremendous advantage for us.
Yeah, thank you, Lucian, and thank you, Ernest. I'd like the panel to take a look at that question that's just come through on regulations, standards, and purposeful AI. Whilst you take a look at that, I'd like to start to steer the conversation towards critical infrastructure, which is a very important aspect of what we want to discuss. So right now, of course, with in the advent of AI and cyber attacks, and with our abilities to respond by utilizing AI and cyber defense and upskilling our organizations across the United States and across all our allied nations, what should be our priorities and our concerns? I mean, how vulnerable do you feel that we are from a critical infrastructure standpoint? And here I'd really like to invoke as much as possible some of the experience that Lucian brings from his speciality through being the CEO of BCS, Building Cybersecurity, the work that Lucian has been doing in terms of helping to secure the commercial facility sectors in the United States, and perhaps potentially extending that in the future also to like other areas of great vulnerability, like water treatment plants. Could you tell us a little bit about what has worked and what hasn't, Lucian?
Yeah, so I'm going to be really quick, because I'm looking forward to hearing from the other panelists. But my world, since I was in DoD, I focused on operational technologies, OT. I'm a big believer that IT is for amateurs, OT is for professionals when it comes to killing people or causing property damage. So I'm definitely been focused while I was in DoD. How do we safeguard the operational technology we rely on in our lives? Our phones, our cars, they're all OT. Our homes, our buildings, our airplanes, everything is a series of connected systems where a virtual command is passed on to have a physical impact. That is my world, the cyber physical world. And in that case, AI has to help us. I think AI, particularly machine learning, which is a subset, and some people say it's a separate entity. Machines need to learn when there's a nefarious data input coming in and be sensitive enough to alert humans, hey, we got a problem here. AI can do that, combined with sensors, can get to that level of understanding to go ahead and give a warning that there's a device that's being used for a purpose for which it was not intended. So I really do believe we need to urgently move in that direction, incorporating AI platforms into our engineering systems, and then being able to quickly understand that real-time situational awareness of where we can make decisions fast, that we have a piece of OT, operational technology, that's going to hurt somebody if we don't intervene. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. But I don't know if anybody else has got more on that. That's what I'm solely focused on.
Just on that, before you move on, do you think that the boat that smashed into the Delaware bridge was an OT cyber attack?
No comment.
Yeah. Or do you think it could have been?
I think there's a lot going on right now that the American people are not aware of, and actually the world's not aware of. I think Volt Typhoon scares the crap out of me. I'm not sure if folks are watching that. Sol Typhoon scares me even more. And there's more typhoons out there that are just really not good for national security or for ordinary citizens. So yes, I would not put it by anybody. I do not have. I want to make sure I don't have any information on that particular attack. I just don't want to make a comment one way or the other. But we definitely have to focus on where AI can assist us. And Carlo and the rest of the team, I love the fact what we're doing with Cyber Eagle and building cybersecurity. We were bringing that OT awareness into a new platform where we can look at risks, but more importantly, where AI and the marketplace can ultimately mitigate that risk.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to chime in? Michael, Adnan.
I don't know whether you want to have the pessimistic view of a CISO right now in front of the audience. I don't want to scare the living hell out of the audience because as a CISO, I'm dealing with a lot of this all the time. And in my role with the NGO, I'm seeing a lot of what happens with critical infrastructure. And it is a very scary world right now out there, for certain. There's a lot of things that are happening that people are not aware of. There's a lot of things that are happening that just get lost in all of the media buzz that happens every time. I don't know, we just had a question about malicious intent and how to detect this. Even if I take this outside of the realm of critical infrastructure, did anybody capture the situation that happened with a teenager and character AI recently, where a teenager was talking to an AI model related to Game of Thrones, and the teenager was very depressed. Spoiler warning here, this is not a good outcome of the story, and the model told the teenager to come home, and the teenager decided to take their life. Right? I mean, this happens at small scale, and now you look at this and you just look at this entire situation and you blow it up, and you end up with OT and with critical infrastructure, and you see how big the mission is, the problem is that we need to solve. Now we have a lot of sensor systems, a lot of data. We're building security data lakes. Industry is building security data lakes. Government likely is doing the same thing. Obviously, is probably already sitting on a lot of this stuff. AI helps us to make better use of this. AI helps us to get better situational understanding, and then helps us to prioritize accordingly, or it can help us better than that, to get better at that, because it can also create a bunch of signals to where we have so much information overload that we don't really know how to act and what to do anymore. I think if we do this well, then AI will help us definitely move the security posture forward as it relates to critical national infrastructure. And again, this is kind of where Cyber Eagle is trying to make an impact.
Can I jump on that real quick? I don't want to hog everything up, but I got to say something what Michael just mentioned. We in this world have suffered from generations of a lack of critical thinking. We have to restore that. We as the human brain can determine that doesn't seem right, that doesn't sound right, that deep fake doesn't quite get it. We've got to improve our ability to critically think. I mean, there are a lot of folks out there think the most valuable degree 10 years from now is going to be a philosophy degree as opposed to an engineering degree, because the ability to think and understand and move beyond AI. To me, that is one way to solve the problem. We've got to stop worrying about what's going on with P. Diddy or what's going on with all the, and start paying more attention to the issues and raising awareness of the issues that ultimately are going to affect our lives a lot more intimately than what's going on with some celebrity. So I'm just making a pitch for folks just getting smarter. People on this webinar it's a great start, but we do need to continue to raise awareness and be able to discern what's real and not real, starting with what's in our own brain and in our own instinct.
100%.
And Carlo, can I chime in? I 100% agree with Lucian, and what I wanted to add is that part of the problem with the technologies like the large language models today is that we don't completely understand how they work. And to make it worse, they are black boxes for the most part. They will absorb all kinds of information, and they have no concept of the real world. And a large language model doesn't know the difference between a cat or a dog or a ball or anything of that sort. And you can put in these safeguards as layers on top. But as we've seen, it's so easy to circumvent some of these protections that you have. In fact, if you just write the prompt in a very slightly different way, you can have it give you the recipe for something very, very nefarious, right? And that ultimately is the problem, is that we need to better understand how some of these technologies work. And that kind of leads me into, the question that we have on the comments is, the regulatory side will always, lag the technology. And by its very definition, technology is changing so rapidly that, before we've even enacted any kind of regulation, the technology has moved on, 2 steps ahead. And that is part of the problem, is that there's going to be this over-reliance on technology. I think, Lucian, you and I would agree that, AI doesn't get it always right. But what do you think is going to happen to the average person, if they're using a tool and they keep on using it and it's right 90% of the time? They sort of defer their decision making to the tool, but when it does make a wrong decision, they're not smart enough to catch it, right? And that's the danger, is that you take the human out of the loop, then the human stops being useful, and it's not critically examining the outputs of the AI. And again, this is, it's a very complex problem. The AI technology itself is very, very hard, but the more we take ourselves out of the decision-making process, the more likely we're going to be subject to all kinds of errors and biases in the data and so on.
So can I just jump on that again real quick? The regulatory question. Regulations, to me, don't necessarily work. A lot of times regulations can be counterproductive because they give a false sense of security about something happening when in reality it's moved way beyond that. The cyber realm, the AI realm, it's moving at the speed of light. Regulations are 3 to 5 years behind. Yeah. And you're 100% correct. In a situation where I trusted AI and that ended up making a very bad decision, who's liable, AI or me? I'm liable. So AI is a tool, but ultimately it's not going to dissolve the individual from being ultimately responsible for that decision or that liability. And so we're going to get into a whole insurance realm here in the future where AI has manipulated the car controls, caused a car to crash. Is it the driver's fault? Whose fault is it? We're getting into whole areas of property and casualty of liability here that we cannot remove the human out of that loop. Ultimately, that human is responsible for using that tool, and if that tool was wrong, it's responsible for the human to identify that first before making a decision.
I guess I'm going to be the doom looper here a bit. So welcome to Blade Runner. I agree with both of you, and I think there are bumpers to be put in place. I agree, especially Lucian, in terms of the fact is that regulatory compliance will always be behind. We saw this originally with the critical infrastructure protection regulations out of NERC. When we developed the second, third, fourth tiers of those, we went very much from compliance to risk-based. And I think that was the best thing we ever did in terms of helping to secure the power grid. We're going to have to do that a lot more with what we're talking about here, scaled up and much faster. When I used to talk about security of the grid, I used to talk about the fact that we had a sort of an 18th century, early 1900s infrastructure being governed by 1950s management structures, trying to address 21st century control systems, which is basically we're now looking at that pretty much on steroids in terms of pretty much all of our manufacturing and critical infrastructure elements. In terms of the dystopian element, yes, ideally, I would love to have a human in the loop everywhere. In reality, I think that is going to be harder and harder to do going forward. And I guarantee you that, let's just say, certain authoritarian countries, in terms of their weapon systems and capabilities, are going to have far less concern about that issue than this group of this panel and probably everyone who's actually listening to us right now. So my concern is, how do we manage a world in which we want to can maintain a human in the loop, which has always been the advocacy, for example, for DoD, in a world where the speed of decision is what decides warfare, for example. And in this case, it bleeds over into economics, it bleeds over into finance, it bleeds over into critical infrastructure. So I don't have an answer for that, but be quite honest, that's the thing that kind of keeps me up late, at night. I don't know if hopefully someone on the panel has an answer for it, but I think there is, in terms of we're going to have to get better at how we use AI to counter AI. But that's kind of the concern I have right now going forward. Worrying about, like I said, I really don't want to wind up in Neuromancer or Blade Runner going forward.
I love that.
Yeah,
Ernest.
yeah,
Go ahead.
and to address that Ernest's point, I think the danger is you're right. I at some point we are not. It's just not going to be feasible to have a human in the loop at every stage of a decision-making process. But the problem is when we try to overestimate the capabilities of a particular technology, right? We all know spreadsheets add numbers very well. There's no point in me going through every cell and making sure the numbers add up. But if I'm using a machine learning algorithm or something of that sort that is judging whether I should give a loan to somebody or not, and it's been trained on buyer's data, and I have no way of challenging it, then I might be denying a loan for a mortgage to somebody who should be getting one, but based on historical biases that the data has been trained on, you are affecting someone's sort of future from that perspective. And I think that, and this is a very old example. This is not new. This is like 10, 15 years old. We were talking about this, but it's when you take a technology that's really not been tested, it's really not been vetted. I mean, and you can see that today, right? I mean, if you ask how to generate image, of people shaking hands, sometimes you'll see an image with like 6 fingers, on each hand, sort of. The technology is it will continue to get better. It's just not there yet. And in my mind, prematurely adopting something when it's not ready is really where the danger lies. And as humans, we tend to be impatient in how quickly we can operationalize something and make money from it. And so, yeah, that's really where the danger lies.
So as we move towards the final section, I wanted to address the international nature, and to talk about the fact that cyberspace has no borders. And so I fully agree with the concept of sovereign AI, but at the same time, cyber criminality and adversarial nations are closer than we think, and they don't have to go through airport customs necessarily, right? So how do we approach this whole concept of international collaboration? To what extent do we want to hold hands and befriend and be really open and embracing? Do we draw? I mean, the battle lines have been drawn. It's pretty clear which are the countries that are on one side in terms of the geopolitical axis, if you like, and the ones that are on the adversarial side. That's pretty clear. Is that going to change in the next 5 to 10 years? Will, for example, the new administration that we have here change things, or the new administrations that we'll have in other countries? To what extent do we see geopolitics as being even more volatile than it has been before? And with that in mind, how do we go about our cyber diplomacy efforts? Would anybody like to pick up on that?
I can start, although I'm not sure you're going to like the answer.
Go on. I love your answer.
So first of all, trying to resolve disputes between countries in cyber is absolutely useless, because you've got individual citizens or bad actors that are acting regardless of a country's policies. So the cyber, you hit it correct. The cyber domain isn't like any other we've ever dealt with. It's not geographic. It's not, protecting sea lines of communication. We built a Navy for 260 years to protect free movement of trade and goods. We're in a completely different world when it comes to the cyber domain. So having nations trying to come up with a regime of protections ultimately is going to hurt the nations who have signed on to those protections, because of the fact it's going to constrict them. And they're not going to be able to manage the bad actors. Now, if we allow a regime, a set of international standards allow us to go after bad actors, regardless of geography, that's good. I'm not sure we'll ever get China or Russia to sign off on that. But that at least allow us to stop recognizing geographic boundaries and just focus on who's actually causing bad activity, whether it be a terrorist or whatever. But the current state that I see of international cyber diplomacy, to me, is more, it's counterproductive. It's not necessarily giving us and making us any safer. It's just imposing more regulations and restrictions on countries on truly trying to protect themselves and their critical infrastructure from a range of bad actors, not just nation states. Thank you, Luce and Ernest.
Yeah, I guess it's the former Intel analyst in me. We're all amateur historians. So I tend to agree with Lucian. I'm not for the cyber equivalent of the Washington Naval Treaty. The fact is that it's only detrimental to those that are willing to actually adhere to the standards or compliance requirements. We sound somewhat Reagan-esque here, but peace through strength is probably going to be the path forward in a lot of this. And that means basically being able to have the best AI models, being willing to push the limits within certain boundaries, again, the bumpers, to make sure we stick within sort of the civil rights and human rights elements, but also understanding that AI is going to be an enabler for a lot of things that we don't currently even understand, much less the things we do understand. The other aspect, I guess, in regards to that is that when we are looking at how we use AI, going forward, the truth is that we need to be willing and able to work with allies in regards to that. That's one of the things that we haven't so far done a very good job of, I don't think. We're trying. That's something, though, that DoD, state, and so forth, I don't mean from a regulatory standpoint, I mean from an actual cooperative standpoint. Few people remember that, reason we got the atomic bomb first wasn't because of American efforts initially. It was because of English efforts. The first, Enigma was cracked because of Polish efforts before the English got a hold of it. So we need to be looking at reinvigorating our technical alliances. And quite honestly, I won't be popular with my European friends on this, but Europe needs to get off the fence in terms of what it is willing and able to do, again, as a U.S. partner. And the U.S. has some efforts that needs to work on this as well, in terms of the axis of authoritarian regimes that we're now facing, which are themselves looking at using this very distributive technology capability to oppose, what remains of the current, free world order. We're at a point now where technology is far, as Lucian was mentioning, far more easily and you mentioned also, Carl, it doesn't have to go through customs. Far easier to get these things through borders. Borders are permeable when it comes to digital. So in that regard, we need to be thinking about how we as free nations work with our allies in order to ensure that we preserve basically our citizens' rights in that world. So that's going to be a real big part of this, where we blend that part of moving from just the technical aspects to very much the international relations, politics, and philosophical aspects of how AI is going to influence our world.
Phenomenal.
I'll get off the.
As I pass it over to Michael, can I ask you to, as you respond to this round of considerations, could you also bleed into an explanation of what the Cyber Eagle project is for the audience that are not aware of it? Because we have mentioned the name a couple of times, but not everybody knows what it's all about.
Of course. So there are three topics now that I need to touch on. The first topic I would like to touch on is, well, I think there's value, of course, in working with our allies. At the end of the chain, when we talk about cyber, there's a human involved. And when we do information sharing and when we shape partnerships with allies to where we can use them to our own advantage, then that is good for us. And we can see this with some of the law enforcement successes that we've had in the Baltics, a giant call center, which was an information, a misinformation call center, got, I want to use the word, popped, because law enforcement agencies across the globe work together. And of course, the US had a huge part in this. But then also, I have to say, and I'm 100% on board here with Ernest, I think the EU has to really do some soul searching. I was at an event recently, and I probably didn't make myself a lot of friends in the EU at that event, because everybody kept talking about regulation. It was an AI-focused event. They were not talking about shaping a innovation ecosystem. It was all focused on regulation. Finally, I spoke up and kind of outlined what the cost can be of regulation when it comes to maintaining your own, I would call this moral and ethical values, which was, Eric Schmidt said, that it will become almost infeasible from a cost perspective to train frontier or major AI models in the EU. That is a consequence of EU energy policy. Well, what's the next place where you can go to train these AI models? Saudi Arabia and UAE. Well, maybe we have some kind of concerns there when it comes to, or on the EU side, when it comes to ethics and moral dilemmas. So whenever you make a decision like that, there is a cost that is attributed with that decision. And I think, you know, when we talk about this Western world order, when we talk about Western democracy and what it stands for, if we want to maintain that, then we have to take that into consideration as well. So I don't know how the EU will want to navigate that, because it seems like they're right now very much on one side of this issue, and they will probably have to really do some internal soul searching here and then figure out how they address this conflict that they created for themselves. The final piece then is, I think you wanted me to briefly talk about Cyber Eagle, right?
Yeah.
So Cyber Eagle is a project that we have initiated, which seeks to solve some of these challenges related to critical infrastructure using a vetted partner network and a how do we say this, AI proactive marketplaces is one of the terms we use, but really what it means is we're using AI in order to scan and prioritize critical infrastructure vulnerabilities in the small to medium-sized critical infrastructure sector. Why is this so important? Well, that's because that's the type of entities that do not have the budgets, that do not have the resources to protect themselves appropriately. It's one thing if you're a giant like telco, yes, you have your teams, you have everything in place, but the reality is, and this is what we're seeing, I think, with a lot of those recent cyber events, what happens if you are a small water utility in a city somewhere in the Midwest? Oh, you might say, well, why would we care
West
about
Texas, Moleshoe, go ahead.
Exactly, right? It's like, well, why would I care about this? Well, because that's 60,000 American lives, potentially.
Right.
We went to war over September 11th. What happens if they get it right? our opponents? What happens if one of these attacks eventually succeeds against a city of 70,000? Right? And I think this is where Cyber Eagle, by going in and helping them kind of like a force multiplier to protect themselves better, to be aware of their own security posture, and then connecting them to a vetted network of solution providers and entities that can help them address those challenges that they have, and potentially even connect them with funding is incredibly valuable. So that's the Cyber Eagle project.
Well, by the way, can I jump on that real quick? So, Michael, it's not just theory. We're seeing in 2024 actual attacks to water systems. Folks in the audience, please look up Muleshoe, Texas. Please look up Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. I mean, this is happening. The Iranians, the Russians, they are actually attacking our water system. So Cyber Eagles come along saying, hey, this time is now. We're no longer talking theory. It's happening. Here's what we can offer to bring down risk significantly in a short amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the terrorists of the future are not going to run around with backpacks. They're going to be doing cybersecurity attacks, right?
They already are. So it's already happening.
That's it. So as we start wrapping up, let's start to put together some your last thoughts. And first of all, with regards to audience questions, there are some complex ones there. I would ask the audience to join again our collaboration environment on the think tank, and we can pick up your questions there and kick them around interactively with you over the next few days. Please join us. As we start to wrap up, what are your thoughts, Ernest, Adnan, Michael, and Lucian, on actionable steps, things that everybody should be thinking about doing as a person and as a business owner or a business executive over in the immediate future, and what should you be considering for the longer term future? How do you envisage society will have to morph in order to adapt to this fourth technological industrial revolution? Who's first?
I guess I can, for us to give other folks the ability to craft. I'll keep mine down to 30 seconds. Every company needs to have a task force, not necessarily the CISO or the CIO, that asks, okay, where AI can benefit our business for an ROI, and where do we run into a critical risk if it's used against us? That's just a fundamental exercise. I would bring in the entire C-suite and have someone brief on where AI can affect their particular company, and then start making some decisions about risk. Three things to do with risk: you either assume it, you transfer it, or you mitigate it. I'm in the mitigation business. I don't think you can transfer AI risk, but you got to start asking those questions real fast, and then ultimately mitigating for return on investment. So that's the advice I would give every company.
All right, Adnan, maybe you can also comment on what you're
on the AGI. Yeah, let me do that. Yeah, actually, it's not an easy question. Let's put it that way. General intelligence. I mean, the problem is the models themselves today have no concept of reality. They operate on a very binary space where they don't have the laws of physics to contend with, so or boundaries or physical boundaries, so things of that sort. So we really have to marry what we have in the models of today with the physical elements of tomorrow, and put in causality and all of those things, because absent that, we're not going to have a general intelligence that looks at the world in a similar way that we humans do. Will it happen? Yes, I definitely think it'll happen. I think there'll be some shortcuts people will take. We already see some of those shortcuts, being incorporated into the models today, but they won't be perfect. But given the improvements as we've seen, actually we may have AI writing AI and getting better at it, and ultimately that might be a solution. But ultimately it's going to involve all kinds of sensor data and the best minds and technologies to put that together. But I agree with Lucian, coming back to our topic, is that every company should be looking at the impacts of AI, how they can utilize it, but also how they can utilize it responsibly. I know most C-suites will be looking at it from a cost-cutting perspective, but I think they have to really look at the responsible and the ethical aspects of incorporating that as part of the business.
Thank you, Adnan. Last few words succinctly from Ernest, and then Michael.
Sure. I think Anand and Lucian covered most of the points I would like to make. And the only thing I would add in terms of companies is, in addition to looking at that, make sure you're looking at AI as a solution for processes, and pick one or two small pilots to start with within your business. Make sure they're not critical elements of your business, but understand that eventually, most likely, AI will become a critical part of your business. If we remember back to 2000s to today, so you've got 20 years there, and how IT basically went from being periphery to basically fundamental operational component, and looking at the fact that most likely AI will do the same thing in the next 3 to 5 years. So you're going to have to wisely but move quickly, starting, like I said, small pilots and move forward to larger implementation, always making sure that you're including the CIO, the CISO, the CTO. So make sure you have the right people in the room to talk. In operations. From the larger perspective, in terms of, just like we were talking about for countries, the ISAL, the ISACs, those are critical. Those are your enablers in terms of getting more bang for your buck in terms of cyber. If you're a sort of small, mid-sized utility company, whatever, that's going to be the leveraging point for you in terms of getting more security than you would just out of whatever your current budget is, for example. So make sure that you're leveraging those resources. And that's one of the things we'll have to do more from a government perspective, is enabling versus regulating.
Thank you, Ernest. Michael, the silver bullet.
Number one, the genie's out of the bottle. It's not going to come back into the bottle. Realize everything we talked about today is already happening. We were not much like, we were talking about the future, but all of the problems we're facing are problems of today, are issues that are actively worked on, or sometimes not, which is really, really bad. So realize that. The second thing is embrace information literacy. Prepare yourself for what is going to happen over the next decade. 3, accept that democracy sometimes needs to have teeth, and that's for very, very good reasons. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I can say AI surpassed my intelligence when it learned to play tic-tac-toe 10 years ago. But what I can say honestly is that the next 10 years, I think, will be massively more impactful on society than the last 100 years. So let's brace for change. Let's brace for impact. Let's keep talking. Join our think tank. Let's stay in touch. We got some great questions there. Unfortunately, I cannot address them all at this point, but we'll keep a log of these and we'll address them in the think tank. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to my distinguished panel and my esteemed audience. Thank you very much, everybody. It's a wrap.